Joe Biden drops out of the 2024 presidential election. We will be breaking down why exactly he dropped out, what led to him dropping out. Also, later on the show, we'll be talking about Christless Conservatism at the RNC, what some of the comments and speakers say, some of the things they've said at the RNC, why that causes concern for Christian conservatives. And finally, we'll end the show talking about dating apps. Why does it seem that young men don't get any matches or any success on dating apps these days? I am your host, Sahil David, aka Sahil the Disciple. This is Beyond the Culture. Okay, so obviously yesterday Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential election, and he did it kind of in a strange way. He did it through a tweet. There was no national press conference, there was no news or reaction about why any of this happened. He just simply sent out a tweet and disappeared for the rest of the day, leaving many people confused. It was reported that a lot of Biden aides actually found out through Joe Biden's tweet that he was dropping out. It's reported that even a day before, on Saturday, July 21st, that Biden was full steam ahead. So what changed between Saturday morning, July 24th, and Sunday, July 22nd, when Joe Biden actually sends out this tweet declaring that he is dropping out of the 2024 presidential election? Before we get to that, I first wanted to read this tweet sent out by Matt Walsh, just to kind of add some humor to the show before we get to some of the serious stuff. So Matt Walsh posts this tweet, and he talks about his 7-year-old's reaction to President Biden dropping out of the race. So he tweets this: "My 7-year-old came into my room while I was watching MSNBC's coverage of Biden's announcement. He looked at me misty-eyed and said, 'Who will defend democracy now, father?' I looked back at him and said, 'Kamala, son. Kamala will save us.' We both started crying tears of joy." So, I mean, obviously that's not something that actually happened, but you gotta appreciate Matt Walsh's sense of humor to what is actually a pretty serious announcement. It's very rare that presidential candidates will drop out of elections halfway through just like that. I think the last notable time I can think of is 1968, when Lyndon B. Johnson famously dropped out in favor of his vice president, Hubert Humphrey. And obviously that rocked the political world at that time. And that seemingly even led to the election of President Nixon in 1968, although it was a close election between him and Vice President Hubert Humphrey. But let's talk about Joe Biden. Why did he drop out? What happened? Obviously, this is a political and cultural podcast in some sense, but this is primarily a Christian one. And I do want to say that one of the things that was on my mind this morning is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 2, which says this. Apostle Paul writes, "I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness." I was talking to my mother yesterday, and I was telling her I actually, in some sense, do feel bad for President Biden. And I know a lot of you are going to scoff at that. You're going to say, hey, he was a bad president. He's always been a conniving politician. And in some sense, a lot of that is true. Joe Biden has not been a friendly force in politics. He's often been very cruel and vindictive. He's quite frankly been very mean to a lot of his staff and a lot of his aides. But you got to think, about a month ago, June 22nd, Trump was leading about 1 to 2 points. Joe Biden still had a very realistic chance to come back in this race and to be elected again in November 2024. And then the June debate happened, and then all these Democratic leaders are calling for him to step down, and then President Trump gets shot, and within a matter of weeks, President Biden's whole campaign falls apart, and now he is exiting the race where just a month ago, he still had a pretty decent chance of winning this race, and now he is completely gone. So on a human level, I do feel bad for President Biden. He has wanted to be president his whole life. He had a very good chance, and in a matter of weeks, his entire campaign crumbles, and now he is here, exiting the race and leaving things to his vice president, Kamala Harris. So at least on a very human level, I do feel bad for Joe Biden. He has said he is not resigning the presidency, so he is not stepping down. He will continue on as the president of the United States. And Lord willing, we as Christians should be praying for him that he stays in good health and that he does a good job as he stays president for this final 6 months. Because today is July 22nd. 6 months from now will be January 22nd, and Biden will be out of office, 2 days out of office. And either we will have a 47th president, Donald Trump, or a 47th president, Kamala Harris, assuming she's the presidential nominee. That's not a guarantee, and I will talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about the buildup to President Biden leaving the race. So obviously things were already not looking good. So prior to the June debate, he had been following the polls. Trump had slowly been picking up, and by the time we got to the June debate, President Trump had about a 1 to 2 point lead, maybe about 3 points in some national polls. But it looked like that he had a pretty good shot at winning. By no means a guarantee. 2 points is still very much within the margin of error. But President Biden had hope, right? He had hope that he could come back and turn things around, that he could have a good debate performance, and that he could slowly pick up momentum these final few months and take a pretty solid lead going into the November 2024 election. Instead, he performed terribly. He slurred his words. He was slow to respond. Often people couldn't understand what he was saying. He looked very sleepy and tired, in contrast to President Trump, who looked very alive, very energetic. You could disagree with a lot of what Trump was saying. Trump did say several lies throughout the presidential debate, but none of that mattered. None of that mattered. What the American people saw was a sleepy Joe Biden, as President Trump likes to call him, and they saw a formal, very strong, very energetic President Trump. And it didn't matter substantively what President Trump was saying. People got the message that President Trump was strong, he was in command, he was in control of his faculties, and Joe Biden was tired, he was sleepy, he was possibly becoming senile. There's been rumors of President Biden possibly having dementia. There's been rumors of Joe Biden possibly having a doctor visit over 20 times the last several months to check him for Parkinson's. And he just couldn't last. He couldn't last. These last several weeks, you've had several Democratic leaders, ranging from Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, all of them meeting privately with Biden and telling him that he needed to drop out. Nonetheless, President Biden kept going, and for a little over 3 weeks, he said, "Nope, I'm staying in this race. I'm fighting on. We are going forward." Even as soon as late as a couple of days ago, President Biden tweeted this out, which, in the light of Trump's near assassination just a week ago, I felt this was a very irresponsible tweet from Joe Biden. Many Democrats are still tweeting very irresponsibly. So, Lord willing, another assassination attempt doesn't happen on Trump's life. But I mean, look at this tweet from just a couple of days ago from President Biden. So it says, "Protect democracy, defeat Trump and Vance." Guys, you can say a lot of things about President Trump and his new running mate, J.D. Vance. They're not a threat to democracy, okay? How do we know this? Because Trump was literally president from 2016 to 2020. Did democracy end? No, democracy did not end. We do not have a Emperor Trump in office. Trump left office, and Joe Biden became the new president. Was Trump a threat to democracy? No, democracy continued. The American people voted for Joe Biden in November of 2020, and there was a transfer of power. Yes, there was drama with January 6th, but within a few hours that ended. President Trump had called for a peaceful protest. Sadly, it didn't end peacefully, but President Trump had called for a peaceful protest, and democracy continued. So for Joe Biden to continue to be tweeting out things like protect democracy, that Trump is an existential threat to the American Republic, very irresponsible and just a flat out lie. Joe Biden knows it's a lie, and yet he's still choosing to tweet things out like this. So extremely, extremely irresponsible rhetoric from President Joe Biden. But so obviously I got off of church yesterday afternoon and I checked Twitter and I saw that Joe Biden had an announcement. So we're going to go to Joe Biden's Twitter account, or his X account. I know I keep saying Twitter. It's officially called X now, but let's look at Joe Biden's tweets. So he doesn't hold a press conference. He doesn't do any of the things that you would expect a president announcing that he's dropping out of a race to do. Instead, he sends a tweet. Maybe that's our modern social media age, but this is how President Biden chooses to announce that he is dropping out of the campaign. So at yesterday at 1:46 p.m., he tweets this. He says, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world. America has never been better positioned to lead them than we are today. I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world." And then he says this: "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who worked so hard to see me re-elected. I wanted to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have, that there is nothing America can't do. What we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America." Obviously, this sends off a shockwave across the American political sphere, and now the Democratic National Convention is scrambling to figure out who the next nominee will be. I'll get into the Democratic National Convention and whether it truly will be Vice President Kamala Harris who will pick up the baton, or whether it will be somebody else like Governor Gavin Newsom of California or Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And we'll get to that in just a second. But what led to this? What ultimately led Biden to dropping out? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, after Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention, did this Instagram Live. So we are going to very quickly look at her video. And she kind of gives a state of the race from her opinion. And this is what she has to say.
Everybody is terrified of a Trump presidency. And everybody wants to do everything and anything possible to prevent that from happening. And I think that regardless,
so yeah, I think we can end it there. But yes, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying, hey, Democrats are afraid. They do not want another Trump presidency. And yet that looks like what is very, very likely to happen. She suggests that many people probably are not a fan of Vice President Kamala Harris to be the nominee. She, by several metrics, is the most unpopular vice president of all time. Her approval rating is consistently at around anywhere between 32 38%. So abysmal numbers, like absolutely terrible numbers for somebody that wants to seek to be the president of the United States. So AOC does that Instagram Live. So it's already pretty clear that a lot of people want Joe Biden out. They are not confident in his ability to win the presidential election. It looks like that Trump is going to win in a landslide if President Joe Biden remains the nominee. And so for weeks, Joe Biden is getting all this pressure from several Democratic leaders. None of that matters to him, though. He feels like as long as he has a chance to win, he is going to continue. He even made the comment at one point that he would only drop out if God himself told him he needed to drop out. So that was basically Joe Biden's way of saying, hey, I'm not dropping out. And again, as early as Saturday morning, he was saying our campaign is moving full steam ahead. What changed? What changed between Saturday morning and Sunday afternoon when President Joe Biden announces he's not running? Politico posts this article, and I'm going to read it because I think Politico does a really good job of explaining what happened. So Politico posts this article, Why Biden Finally Quit, the Saturday night decision that ended Biden's re-election campaign. The article reads this: for 23 days, President Joe Biden insisted on pushing forward with his re-election bid in the face of calls from Democratic lawmakers and donors for him to step aside. Early Saturday, Biden told senior aides it was full steam ahead for the campaign. But by later that evening, he had changed his mind following a long discussion with his two closest aides. Steve Ricchetti, who's been with Biden since his days in the Senate, drove to see the president at his house on the Delaware shore on Friday. Mike Donnellan arrived on Saturday. The two men, both of whom had been by Biden's side during key decisions about whether to seek the presidency in 2016 and 2020, sat at a distance from the president, still testing positive for COVID, and presented damning new information in a meeting that would hasten the end of Biden's political career. In addition to presenting new concerns from lawmakers and updates on a fundraising operation that had slowed considerably, they carried the campaign's own polls, which came back this week and showed his path to victory in November was gone, according to 5 people familiar with the matter who, like others interviewed for the article, were granted anonymity. The only others with Biden in the residence were 2 campaign officials. I'm going to skip down, but long story short, Biden realized he wasn't going to win. He had dropped to, Trump had gained about a 3 to 4 point lead after debate. After his near assassination attempt, that lead grew to 5-6 points. And by Saturday evening, President Biden was seeing polls that Trump had a 7-point lead in pretty much all of the swing states. You are not winning re-election with that numbers. You are not winning re-election when you were down 7 points. Joe Biden dropped out not because he was senile, not because he was weak, not because of any of those reasons, not because of even calls from his Democratic election. Joe Biden dropped out because he realized that he was not winning. The polls have become so bad that there was no path for him to win. And so he said, you know what? I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose to Donald Trump. I would rather throw it to somebody else and see maybe if they have a chance to win. So, it's a shocking turn of events. Again, a month ago, Joe Biden still had a very real chance of winning this race. It was June 22nd. The debate was coming up. Biden had a chance to gain some momentum and win this race. Within a matter of weeks, his whole campaign has fallen apart, and now he's out of the race. So we wish Joe Biden a safe and healthy final few months as president, and we look forward to the future. Who will be the Democratic nominee? Who will face Donald Trump in a contest to become the 47th president of the United States? So one thing I want to make clear, a lot of people think Vice President Harris will instantly become the nominee. That is actually not the case. So the Democratic National Convention has not happened yet. As of right now, all the delegates are still pledged to Joe Biden, with a few exceptions. I think Tennessee and South Carolina's delegates have now thrown their support to Kamala Harris. But Several of the delegates remain uncommitted. There is a clause within the DNC that when a nominee drops out, that the delegates can vote their conscience. Will they choose Kamala Harris? I actually think they will. Earlier this morning, I was a little bit skeptical. I thought that perhaps maybe Governor Gavin Newsom or maybe another candidate could try to come and take the nomination last minute. However, to my surprise, Governor Gavin Newsom has actually endorsed Kamala Harris. Before I get to Governor Newsom's tweet, though, I wanna talk about Kamala Harris real quick. So Joe Biden actually did not initially endorse her. So that letter that we just read, he didn't endorse her fully there. However, it wasn't very long later, pretty much a few minutes later, Joe Biden sent out this following tweet where he very clearly does endorse Kamala Harris. A few minutes after Joe Biden's tweet, Kamala Harris posts her own tweet saying this: "On behalf of the American people, I thank Joe Biden for his extraordinary leadership as President of the United States and for his decades of service to our country. I am honored to have the President's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win the nomination." Again, Kamala Harris is not automatically the new Democratic nominee. She has to go through the DNC process. Presumably, maybe there'll be a few challengers. However, like I said, a lot of people that probably would have challenged Kamala Harris have actually tweeted in support of her. So Governor Gavin Newsom was long seen to be maybe one of the rivals of a possible Kamala Harris candidacy. And yet Gavin Newsom had this to say. So he tweeted this out: "Tough, fearless, tenacious. With our democracy at stake and our future on the line, no one is better to prosecute the case against Donald Trump's dark vision and guide our country in a healthier direction than America's Vice President, Kamala Harris." Gavin Newsom, possibly Kamala Harris's chief rival, endorses Kamala Harris. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also had this to tweet. She said this: "Kamala Harris will be the next president of the United States. I pledge my full support to ensure her victory in November. Now more than ever, it is crucial that our party and our country swiftly unite to defeat Donald Trump and the threat to American democracy. Let's get to work." Again, AOC is pulling a Joe Biden. She still continues to call Donald Trump a threat to democracy when, again, it is very clear that Donald Trump is not a threat to democracy. If he loses in November 2024, Kamala Harris or whoever the Democratic nominee will become the 47th president of the United States. Democracy will not end because it didn't end in November 2020 when Donald Trump lost that election. So all of these forces are throwing their support behind Kamala Harris. Why? I have a theory. I don't think any of these people actually think Kamala Harris has a very good chance of winning. Last time I checked, many of the polls have Kamala Harris behind Donald Trump by about 5 or 6 points. So she does slightly better than Joe Biden. But as of right now, she still has a lot of ground to make up and cover if she wants to defeat Donald Trump come November 2024. My real theory is I think these people are consolidating around Kamala Harris because I think a lot of them kind of realize that she's probably not going to defeat Donald Trump in November of 2024. I think a lot of them realize that none of them can actually beat Donald Trump in November. And so rather than risk your political career, rather than try to fight and become the Democratic nominee and lose to Donald Trump in 2024, I think a lot of them are like, hey, you know what? Let's just all unite around Kamala. Let's throw her out there. If she wins, great. But if she goes down in flames like we expect her to go down in flames against Donald Trump, then hey, let's sacrifice her. Let's throw her in front of the fire. And then maybe one of us has a good chance to win in 2028. So these Gavin Newsom endorsements, I don't think any of them are actually doing it because they expect Kamala Harris to win. I think they're saving their own skins so that they could maybe have a fighting chance come the 2028 election. So that's my theory. I think when the Democratic National Convention actually happens, I think Kamala Harris will actually become the nominee. Whether she wins in November is to be seen. I do think Kamala Harris actually does have a path to victory. She is behind right now, but she is a lot younger than Joe Biden. She is a awkward candidate. She is a very unpopular candidate. However, if the entire Democratic convention unites behind her, she could slowly pick up ground, and we could see her come pretty close to beating Trump and possibly even beating Trump come November 2024. So I think Christian conservatives should actually take her somewhat seriously. I do think President Trump probably does have a good chance of beating her. However, she's not a candidate to completely swipe under the rug. But again, to summarize, why are all these Democrats uniting against her? I think they see that, hey, let's throw her out there. If she loses, we save our hides for a possible 2028 election. So Joe Biden is no longer the candidate. So it will be Donald Trump versus someone that is not either a Biden, a Clinton, or a Bush. Why do I say that? Ben Jones had this to tweet out, and I think this is very interesting. So Ben Jones says this will be the first presidential election since 1976 to not have a Biden, Bush, or Clinton on the ticket. Think about it. 1980, you have George H.W. Bush be the vice presidential candidate. Then the next several years, it's either a Bush or a Clinton. Obviously Bill Clinton becomes the nominee in the 90s. The 2000s, George W. Bush becomes the nominee. 2008 to 2016, you have Joe Biden be the vice presidential nominee. 2016, Hillary Clinton obviously is the presidential nominee. 2020, Joe Biden is the presidential nominee. So from 1980 to 2020, for nearly 40 years, you have a Biden, a Bush, or a Clinton be on the ticket, whether it is as the presidential nominee or whether it is the vice presidential nominee. So that is pretty amazing. So this is going to be the first presidential election since 1976 where you don't have a Biden, Bush, or Clinton. I think that's pretty amazing. I think that's pretty cool to point out and to talk about. So with that in mind, how are Democrats feeling about Kamala Harris? Well, she's still pretty unpopular in the party. She's still pretty unpopular amongst the American people. However, they have to express some kind of confidence in her, right? Which is why you have some pretty ridiculous tweets like this. So Tristan Snell, he is a lawyer and political commentator. He tweeted this out, and I've actually seen several similar tweets to this, but a lot of Democrats are touting Kamala Harris as this aggressive prosecutor, this former district attorney that is going to go out and she's going to get Donald Trump. And so they're like, oh, Donald Trump is quaking in his boots at the possibility of having to face bulldog Kamala Harris in the debate. So Tristan Snell has this tweet. He tweets this: if Kamala Harris is the Dem nominee, will Donald Trump debate her? If he debates her, she will cut him to ribbons. If he ducks a debate, he will look scared. Total lose-lose situation. This is my reaction. I mean, like, what is Tristan Snell even talking about? Donald Trump, for all his mean criticisms and for all his faults, he is someone that will throw the kitchen sink at you. He went very hard against Hillary Clinton in 2016. He went very hard against Joe Biden in 2020. I don't think that was an effective strategy at that time. Joe Biden's perception, at least in 2020, was a kindly old sleepy grandpa, and being mean the way that Donald Trump was not really an effective strategy at the time. But here we are. So, they have to stir up some kind of excitement for Kamala Harris. And so I've seen several tweets saying that Kamala Harris is going to absolutely destroy Donald Trump in a debate. I very much think the opposite is true. Now, obviously, again, as a Christian, I don't think being mean or harmful to your opponents is a good strategy. I loved Mike Pence's debate against Kamala Harris in 2020. So Mike Pence was always a kind and gently debater. He would be hard. He would point out facts. So he would say, hey, you are planning to cut tax cuts. You are planning to pass abortion policies. You are planning to, prosecute all these people. Vice President, at the time, Senator Kamala Harris. You were prosecuting Black and brown people for smoking marijuana. So Mike Pence did all of this very kindly. He stated the facts and he laid it hard, but he was respectful, he was kind, and he was civil. As Christians, I think this is how we need to be. I think about that verse in let me see if it was 2 Peter or 1 Peter, where you do everything with gentleness and respect. So let me look up the verse, so I'm making sure I'm not getting it right. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope you have. Do this with gentleness and respect. Now, obviously in politics, you're not sharing the gospel. Peter's talking specifically about sharing the gospel in this particular verse. However, I think this is a model that when we're debating anything, because what is politics? Politics is an extension of your core beliefs. If you're a Christian, if you have Christian values, your politics flow out of your Christian values. If you're someone that was a strong Christian leader like Mike Pence famously once said this. He said, I am a Christian first, a conservative second, and a Republican third. That was the order that he saw of importance. I thought that was a beautiful statement by him. And so, if Mike Pence is arguing what he believes to be godly values in a vice presidential debate, he is going to be gentle and respectful. That's something I don't really see from President Trump. That's something I don't see from his vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance. And I think that's a tragedy. I think for us as Christians, when we are contending for the faith, when we are debating with the secular forces of the world, we need to be gentle and respectful. Why? Because that's how our Lord was. Now, there were times when Jesus Christ was harsh in debate, but he was harsh when he knew that the other people weren't going to change their mind. When Jesus is calling the Pharisees a brood of vipers, he knows that they're not changing. He knows that they are not going to submit to the gospel. And so, Jesus does go hard on people that are already so far gone. On people whose mind you can change, Jesus was soft, gentle, and courteous. Look at how he talks to the woman at the well. He confronts her sin. He says, hey, the fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you are with now is not your husband. But he also gives her an opportunity to accept him as Messiah, to enter into faith in Jesus Christ, and to have salvation from sin. How beautiful was Jesus' debate strategy to bring somebody to saving faith. I think that if you are a Christian, particularly someone who's a Christian and a conservative, if you want to win people over to the Christian side, to the conservative side, do it with gentleness and respect. Do it with gentleness and respect as St. Peter has done it. So, will it be on some level humanly fun to watch Donald Trump destroy Kamala Harris in a debate or vice versa? Sure. Is that how you win people over to your side, quote unquote? No, I don't think it is. So, okay, I want to shift gears, and I actually want to talk about the Republican National Convention last week. And I specifically want to talk about Christless Conservatism, because a lot of the things I saw at the Republican National Convention deeply concerns me as a Christian that wants to conserve traditional values, as a Christian that wants to conserve biblical principles. And what I saw from the RNC was a lot of the opposite of that. Before I get to that, though, very quickly, there's new footage showing how Donald Trump survived being assassinated last week. So very quickly, I want to show this video.
Take a look what happened.
Yeah, so obviously you see him turn his head at the last possible second, because the bullet, where it was going to hit him in the back of the head, and Donald Trump would be a dead man. Instead, he turns his head at the last second and the bullet instead grazes his ear. Very amazing footage. I think anybody that is saying that this shooting was staged is a fool. There's not a sniper on the planet skilled enough to stage a grazing of the ear like that. So anybody that is attempting to say that this was a staged thing is a fool. I'm going to say it. They are a fool. There's not a person on the planet skilled enough to be able to fake the shooting that way. So pretty remarkable footage from new footage of the trajectory of Trump's bullet. And obviously we are grateful that he is alive and not dead. So I also saw this meme. So I want to share this meme. Somebody made a tier list of presidential elections, or not elections, but rather reactions to shootings. So let me pull up the meme. And in the S tier, you have Donald Trump and Teddy Roosevelt. So now, why is Teddy Roosevelt in S tier? So in Teddy Roosevelt's assassination attempt, Teddy Roosevelt was actually shot. He was bleeding, and yet while being shot and bleeding, he gets up on stage, he gives his speech, and it's only after he gives his speech that he ends up going and getting medical treatment. So obviously a very amazing reaction from Teddy Roosevelt in the face of almost getting assassinated. Donald Trump, he gets grazed in the air, there's blood all over his face. He takes time to raise his fist and say, fight, 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 to let his supporters know that he's okay. So obviously, again, that is another S-tier reaction to what happened. I thought this meme was foul for putting Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy as F tier. You don't really have opportunity to react when you are instantly killed, which is what happened with both of these guys. So, but I just thought that was a interesting meme that I would share to kind of break the pace of maybe some of the boring political talk. Let's talk about Christless conservatism. So as a Christian, we believe that values come from Jesus Christ. Morality comes from Christ. Christ is God. He is Lord of all. He is King of kings. When he says commands, that is an immorally objective fact. And so all values come from Christ, and we as Christians seek to preserve those values. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 15 says this: "So then, brothers and sisters, stand firm and hold tightly to the traditions which you were taught, whether by word of mouth or by letter from us." There is this emphasis on preserving the teachings of Jesus Christ and continuing to push forward those ideals. And so why are so many Christians pro-life? Why are so many Christians pro-marriage and pushing for marriage to be defined as between one man and one woman? There's a recognition that these are morals and values from Jesus Christ. And so when we seek to protect the life of the unborn, when we seek to protect the sanctity of marriage, we are conserving those principles in light of a culture that wants to be pro-abortion, that wants to be pro-LGBTQ movement, and ultimately seeks to undermine a lot of the conservative values that we see today. So the Republican Party, the last few decades, has largely stood on these same principles. They say, hey, yes, life is valuable, so we're going to be pro-life. Yes, marriage is important, so we're going to advocate for marriage being between one man and one woman. This is not what we saw at the RNC 2024. So Richard Hananiah posts this. So obviously the Republican National Party agenda came out, and noticeably absent from it was a federal policy on abortion, and there was something about marriage, but marriage was not defined. So the Republican Party says Republicans will promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, which is good and fine, except what does sanctity of marriage means? I am deeply concerned as a conservative Christian that the Republican Party is very quickly abandoning conservative values in an effort to try to win votes. The problem with this is if the Republican Party continues to move this direction, in a few years, in what way will the Republican Party actually look different from the Democratic Party? Calvin Robinson made this very good point against Vivek Ramaswamy on X. So let me see if I can find this. Okay, yeah. So Father Calvin Robinson posts this. He says, so AOC tweets out that conservatives are not going to win Gen Z with their abortion bans and their LGBTQ policies. Vivek Ramaswamy tweets this in response to AOC. So Vivek tweets this. He says, here's a reality check, AOC. The GOP platform does not oppose gay marriage and does not support a federal abortion ban. Wow. These are things that Republicans had defended at some point. They had defended marriage between one man and one woman, and they had defended federally protecting the unborn. Now they've abandoned those things seemingly, if Vivek Ramaswamy's tweet is to be true. Calvin Robinson rightfully goes at Vivek and he says this: the problem with modern conservatives is they're often just liberals in nicer suits. Vivek is a prime example. Please don't hate us. We're just like you, he says, with no shame. If both parties want to degrade society and enable the killing of the unborn babies, what's the point? What's the point? And I think Calvin Robinson is exactly right. If the Republican Party starts to abandon social principles, then what exactly is the difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party? Richard Hananiah tweeted this out, and I do want to spend a good amount of time on this because I think this shows why I hesitate to vote for Donald Trump as a conservative Christian, because I don't think Donald Trump is a conservative candidate. And I think he is moving the Republican Party away from conservatism and into a quasi-liberalism. So Richard Hananiah tweeted this a couple of days ago. He says this: Trump personally dictated the new RNC language on abortion and gay marriage. His team put delegates in a room, took their phones, and Trump said, "You're going to pass this and you're going to do it quickly." Night of the long knives for social conservatives. So, if these reports are true, here are some of the things Trump is saying in back rooms to move the Republican Party away from conservatism and into something else. Richard Hananiah posts this: Mr. Trump made clear to his team that he wanted the 2024 platform to be his and his alone. He wanted it to be much shorter and simpler, and in some cases, vaguer. He was focused on language about abortion, which he recognized was a potentially potent issue against him in a general election. He wanted nothing in the platform that would give Democrats an opening to attack him. And he made this clear to his aides that he was perfectly fine bucking with social conservatives, for whom he had delivered a tremendous victory by reshaping the Supreme Court with a conservative supermajority. Mr. Trump also stressed that he did not want to define marriage. So he doesn't want to define marriage, he says, as between one man and one woman. Instead, the documents contain a vague statement to interpretation. Republicans will promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage. One person involved in the process recalled Mr. Trump saying privately, "Sanctity of marriage, don't define it." Don't define it. Donald Trump is moving to the left. He's moving into quasi-liberalism, and this should deeply, deeply concern social conservatives. If the Republican Party is going to abandon conservative principles, or if they're going to fail to conserve the teachings and morality of Jesus Christ, then what exactly is there to vote for anymore? Obviously, we're not going to vote for the Democratic Party, but what real benefit is there to vote for the Republican Party? Now, I'm not saying don't vote for Donald Trump, but what I am saying is Christian conservatives, We need to be putting pressure on our Republican leaders to return to conservatism. We need to be putting pressure on President Donald Trump to return to conservatism. If we allow Donald Trump to have his way, if we allow the Republican Party to continue to move to the left, then in a few short years, you're gonna have two parties, one very liberal and godless, one kind of liberal and godless. You're gonna have one party that is pro-abortion, the Democratic Party, and you're gonna have another party that's essentially pro-choice, the Republican Party. Who do Christians have to vote for at that point? Who do conservative Christians have to throw their support behind and say, we think this is a president that's going to support godly policies? Joe Biden obviously has not been passing godly policies. He has promoted abortion. He has promoted terrible economic and foreign policy. And you have Donald Trump, who's a little bit better than Biden, but is now seeking to undermine conservative principles to win in an election. A lot to be worried about. A lot to be worried about. I'm currently writing a book called Christless Conservatism, and that's the trend we're seeing. We're seeing Republicans move away from a conservatism rooted in Christianity to a conservatism rooted in some vague sense of kumbaya. Oh, well, we all agree on economics, and so sure, some of our social policies might be the same, but hey, we're going to promote a good economy, we're going to promote a good immigration policy, so yeah, who cares about abortion? Who cares about the LGBTQ agenda? We can get along under this new quasi-liberal republicanism. Conservative Christians need to fight back against this. We cannot afford to lose the Republican Party. We lost the Democratic Party decades ago. We cannot afford to lose another one. We cannot afford to lose another party. James White had this to tweet out. He said that there's a very real Trump cult in the United States. I think largely he is true, which is why we see the RNC so willing to abandon abortion for the sake of appeasing their nominee, Donald Trump. Here's a picture of Donald Trump coming out on stage, big flashing lights, his name brightly displayed, him standing there. Listen, I liked Trump back in 2016. I thought, I didn't like him in 2016, but once he became president, I liked a lot of his policies. But if he is going to shift away from conservatism, I'm going to have a hard time voting for him come November 2024. And if he's going to have this much power to where, because of his celebrity and persona, he is shifting the Republican Party single-handedly away from conservatism, then I don't like Donald Trump. I don't think he is a good force in American politics. I think he is a bad force in American politics. Obviously, a lot of people were upset about Amber Rose speaking at the RNC. If you don't know who Amber Rose is, she was famous for dating a lot of famous rappers and sleeping with a lot of these rappers, one of them being obviously Kanye West. She spoke at the RNC, and I thought she had some good things to say about, hey, I thought Donald Trump was a racist until I did my own research, and now I would vote for him. I thought that message was fine. I don't think Amber Rose is a good person to be doing this message. As of right now, she has an OnlyFans account that is still active to this day. So she still pretty much is pro-choice. She still very much is promiscuity. Wow, I cannot speak right now. But she is somebody that has promoted things like the slut walk. She is somebody that has promoted things of being open with your sexuality and walking around. Is this somebody that Republicans really want to promote? Is this somebody that social conservatives really want to have as their nominee? Or not their nominee, but at least on stage at the Republican National Convention? Now, don't get me wrong. I do hope that Amber Rose repents of those things and that she becomes a true Christian and that she abandons some of those things. But as of right now, there's no indication that she is repentant of any of those sins. She very much seems to want to continue to promote promiscuity. And that is not somebody that we should have standing on a stage at the Republican National Convention and pushing forward the Republican platform. Harmeet Dillon was allowed to walk on stage and do a Sikh prayer to Waheguru. This is what it looks like.
तुम्हारी गत मित तुम ही जानी नानक दास सदा कुर्बानी. Dear Waheguru, our one true God, we thank you for creating America.
Yeah, and there you have it.
As a
She
unique
calls
haven on this
Waheguru
earth
the
where all
one
people are free to
true
worship
God.
according to their faith.
Christless conservatism. Christless conservatism. Harmeet Dillon, let me be very clear. Okay, I'm a fellow Punjabi myself. I understand that most Punjabis are of the Sikh religion and that they believe that Waheguru is the one true God. But let me say this, as a Christian, as a Punjabi, Harmeet Dillon, Waheguru is not the one true God. The one true God is a God that came down, lived on earth, died on the cross for my sins, resurrected from the dead, and has ascended to the right hand of the Father. He is the Lord of Lords. He is the King of Kings. His name is Jesus Christ. He is the one true God, not Waheguru. And yet, the Republican National Convention is allowing people like Harmeet Dillon to say prayers like this. Don't get me wrong, Harmeet Dillon is a very good lawyer. Sikhs are welcome into the Republican Party. Hindus, Muslims, all of these people are allowed into the Republican Party. However, what they are not allowed to do is they are not allowed to pray to their false god, to their pagan gods on this national convention. Why that was allowed, I don't know. I don't know. I fear for the Republican Party. I fear for what Donald Trump is making this party head over. He obviously picked J.D. Vance as his vice presidential candidate. Here's what J.D. Vance had to say about social conservatives.
There has been a lot of rumbling in the past few weeks that the Republican Party of now and the Republican Party of the future is not going to be a place that's welcoming to social conservatives. And really, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say that is not true. Social conservatives have a seat at this table, and they always will, so long as I have any influence in this party.
Social conservatives have a seat at the table. How kind of you, J.D. Vance. How kind of you and President Trump to allow social conservatives to have a seat at the table. Guys, social conservatives built this house. The current Republican Party was run by social conservatives the last several decades. To go from owning the house to be told, you have a seat at the table? How far the Republican Party has fallen. How far the Republican Party has fallen to essentially soft push out social conservatives. Donald Trump could lose this election. He could. And if he loses, it's because of this Christless conservatism. If he loses evangelicals, he is not winning the presidency. Shame on President Trump. Shame on vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance. Shame on the Republican National Convention for abandoning Jesus Christ, for abandoning the values that he has given us, and for bowing down to the idol of diversity, equity, and inclusion, for bowing down to the idol of big tent allowing sexual promiscuity, for allowing pro-choice policies. Shame, shame, shame. I may still vote for Donald Trump, but he is making it very, very hard. He's making it very, very hard for me to vote for him. I want to end today's show with a YouTube video that I saw a couple of days ago. So let me see if I can find this YouTube video. But basically, the video is talking about why Indian men are getting no matches on dating apps. Obviously, many of you know I am an Indian. If that wasn't abundantly obvious, may be abundantly obvious to you now. But yeah, someone sent me this YouTube video. It said why Indian men get 0 matches on dating apps. I'm not necessarily going to talk about Indian men so much, but I do want to play this clip from this YouTuber. about why dating apps tend to be predatory.
I, for one, honestly thought that it was universal truth that everybody knew that dating apps only make money if you stay on them. So it's inherently in their business model to keep you swiping and not find you the perfect match, because then you leave the app. Then how do they make money? In fact, just in February, Match.com, which owns all of these dating companies, by the way, was sued for this very issue. The allegations were that the predatory business model of dating apps like Tinder, Hinge, defrauds those looking for love and fearful of missing out with an algorithm that rewards compulsive use of its platforms and makes them pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year for subscriptions, which is absolutely true. They also said that these companies basically gamify the platforms to transform the users into literal gamblers locked in a search for psychological rewards that the business makes elusive on purpose again. This also...
Okay, I think we're starting to get the idea. Yeah, I think we as Christians should be very, very wary of dating apps. These apps are designed to keep you on the app. It's designed to take advantage of your loneliness, of your emotions, and it's designed to take money from you and keep you single so that you stay on the dating app and so that these companies can make money. Male loneliness is very real. Male loneliness is starting to reach epidemic levels. And, obviously not to say women can't suffer from some of these things too. But I think the predatory nature of these dating apps, I think Christian men, before you get on a dating app and before you hope to find a Christian woman on these dating app, I would say, really pray and seriously consider trying to find a young woman at your local church, or maybe going to some Christian conferences and trying to meet women over there. But I think you are doing yourself a big disservice when you give into some of these predatory dating apps. Indian men, I know sometimes it can be hard to find a date. Last year, a lot of my friends sent me these TikToks. I'm actually going to play one of them. There's several TikToks like this, but I'm going to end the show with this TikTok. Just to be a little bit funny, but also just to kind of show where our culture is thinking. So let's take a look at this TikTok.
What's one race you wouldn't date?
Indian people.
Indian?
Okay.
No.
Alright, what about you? Same?
Damn.
Yeah,
is it a-
same. I was gonna say same.
Nah, low key.
Same.
Indian people.
Wow.
Why Indian?
Why?
Yeah, just why?
There's no problem with them. I low key have no problem with them. It's just like
Okay,
the way they
yeah,
look.
I mean, obviously, I'm Indian, so it's not fun to hear. Several people say that the one race they would not date is Indians. A lot of my friends were sending me TikToks like this, kind of just to make fun of me a little bit, and they're like, Sahil, this is why you're single. But I'm gonna end the show with this: all humans, Indians included, are made in the image of God. Whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Indian, Asian, Native American, all the indigenous groups and tribes of this place, you were made in the image of God. You are deeply loved by God. And videos like these are very shallow on its surface, and it really actually seeks to make fun of people made beautifully in the image of God. So, not really a fan of these videos. Obviously, I mean, you could say, Sahil, you're Indian, so obviously you're going to be offended. I don't know, maybe so. But, I mean, even if it was another race that was being made fun of, I still would have said videos like these are quite silly. But yeah, I think that will do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in to Beyond the Culture. And I will have another episode possibly either later this week or next week. But thank you so much for tuning in. This is Beyond the Culture. Please be sure to follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Sahil the Disciple. And I look forward to seeing you soon.